So today, what I wanted to talk about is, well, several things related to the upcoming election in a few days. But specifically, I wanted to talk about a concept that I originally introduced in The Parasitic Mind, my 2020 book, where I talked about the homeostasis of victimology. And so, what I want to do first is read you a small. So, this is on page 101 of The Parasitic Mind, because I'm going to set up the framework for explaining some of the unbelievably dishonest reactions that people are having to Donald Trump. And I'm going to use, as I said, the homeostatic model to explain it. So this is from page 101, as I said, in The Parasitic Mind. The section is titled The Homeostasis of Victimology. Bear with me as I provide a little background on the ubiquity of homeostasis, how we study it, and its implications, because it will help illustrate an important point about victimology. Many biological and man-made systems are governed by processes that seek to maintain a set or optimal equilibrium level. For example, a room thermostat regulates the flow of cold or hot air such that a set temperature is maintained. The human body contains several such homeostatic systems, including processes that controls one's body temperature, glucose levels, and arterial pressure. Homeostatic systems are not restricted to physiological processes. Several influential psychological theories are based on the idea of homeostasis. The psychologist John Fletcher drew a parallel between physiological and psychological homeostasis. Quote, "The rise of temper against an insult is not essentially different from the rise of temperature against infection. Both represent the attempts of an organism to maintain status. In the one case, it is a body status. In the other, it is a social status that is to be maintained." Close quote. Drive reduction theory posits that humans are compelled to reduce the discrepancy between a current state and a desired state in order to meet a physiological or psychological need. For example, when hungry or thirsty, an individual will act to slake their hunger or thirst. Drive reduction theory can explain a very broad range of human phenomena. Homeostatic comparisons are also the key element in what is known as multiple discrepancies theory, which focuses on how people measure satisfaction with elements of their lives. For example, I might gauge the discrepancy, if any, between my current income and what I expect to have at this stage in my career, or I could contrast my current income to that of my relevant peers. The bottom line is that there are multiple ways by which one might establish a discrepancy between a current and desired state and accordingly be motivated to close that gap. And then I go on explaining much more about what homeostasis is, and then I argue that the manner by which people increasingly define, an aggression or a victimhood is precisely because they need to achieve a homeostatic level of victimology. Our society is hateful, it's misogynistic, it's evil, it's we're sitting on stolen land, and if you don't find that there are enough victimology stories, then you need to redefine what constitutes victimhood in order to maintain that homeostatic level of victimology. So here, let me read one other quick thing. This is from page 103. Psychologist Nick Haslam's idea of concept creep is very relevant to my homeostatic argument. He argues that what constitutes harm and pathology has been massively expanded, and he uses 6 examples to demonstrate this: abuse, bullying, trauma, mental disorder, addiction, and prejudice. In the abstract of his excellent article, Haslam warns, quote, "Although conceptual change is inevitable and often well-motivated, concept creep runs the risk of pathologizing everyday experience and encouraging a sense of virtuous but impotent victimhood," close quote. So I hope you're understanding what I mean here. That you basically, in my homeostatic argument for victimology, there is a set thermostat level of what I expect my evil society to have in terms of generating appropriate victims. If I can't find them, I will completely alter the definition of what constitutes victimhood so that I can always achieve that homeostatic level. Now, why am I talking about this in the context of what's about to happen in the United States? Well, there are several things that I want to talk about, but let me begin with, and again, people, imbeciles like children will write to me, oh, Sam Harris lives in your head. No, he doesn't. Sam Harris ranks number 83,000 on my list of important issues in my personal life. But Sam Harris is a person who has a large platform, is a person who purports that he's a philosopher and he's a thinker. So I use him as an exemplar of some of these manifestations. So it's not a specific concern with Sam Harris, but rather with some of the cognitive and emotional distortions that he's exhibiting. Bill Maher is another such gentleman. So what am I talking about here? Sam Harris, from the time that I went on his show in 2016 till right now, probably this minute, he's been saying, he's arguably been the most unhinged when it comes to Trump. Trump is going to end democracy. Trump is going to institute martial law. He did say that, at least Osama bin Laden, was, somehow a better guy, and he offered some philosophical reason why Trump is even more dangerous than Osama bin Laden. Donald Trump is literally an existential threat. He is an asteroid that's hurling to Earth. Now, he's completely wedded to that position. Yes? As is Bill Maher. Absolutely wedded to that position. Now, let's suppose that incoming evidence comes in that suggests that Donald Trump is not going to end democracy. He's not going to be an existential threat. He's not going to end the economy. He's not going to institute martial law. Your children will not be placed in internment camps because your grandmother was black, right? Well, there are two things that you could do at that point. You could say, well, let me rearrange my belief system, or let me double down. And before I get to what is the homeostatic mechanism that people who suffer from Trump derangement syndrome exhibit, I want to go back again to the parasitic mind and quote, some of you may have, this is a quote from page 142 of the parasitic mind, the second page of chapter 7, where I quote from Leon Festinger. Now, Leon Festinger is the pioneer of cognitive dissonance theory, right? Cognitive dissonance theory basically says that people don't like to have this occur in their minds, and so they want to find ways to assuage cognitive dissonance. And so there is an endless number of cognitive strategies that people can engage in, distortions, right, in order to be able to have congruency within their inner beliefs. So let me read what Leon Festinger said. This is from page 142 in The Parasitic Mind. Please listen to every word, because it is an extraordinarily powerful explanation of where we are today with the Trump and Kamala Harris situation. Okay, so everything I'm going to read you now is a quote from Leon Festinger. A man with a conviction is a hard man to change. Tell him you disagree and he turns away. Show him facts or figures and he questions your sources. Appeal to logic and he fails to see your point. We have all experienced the futility of trying to change a strong conviction, especially if the convinced person has some investment in his belief. We are familiar with the variety of ingenious defenses with which people protect their convictions, managing to keep them unscathed through the most devastating attacks. But man's resourcefulness goes beyond simply protecting a belief. Suppose an individual believes something with his whole heart. Suppose further that he has a commitment to this belief, that he has taken irrevocable actions because of it. Finally, suppose that he is presented with evidence, unequivocal and undeniable evidence, that his belief is wrong. What will happen? The individual will frequently emerge not only unshaken, but even more convinced of the truth of his beliefs than ever before. Indeed, he may even show a new fervor about convincing and converting other people to his view. Close quote. This is one of the most astounding quotes that perfectly explains something that I answered last year when I was asked on a British show hosted by a British psychiatrist. What is the singular phenomenon, Professor Saad, in your 30 plus years as a professor of behavioral sciences and as an evolutionary psychologist? What is the singular phenomenon that has most surprised you? And boy, there's a big list. I paused for a minute and I said the inability of most people to change their minds. So now let's come back to Trump, and I'm going to link it back to homeostasis for a second. Trump did have a first mandate, right? He did serve one term. So we have the perfect test to see whether during the time that he served in that mandate, whether any of the things that Sam Harris and Bill Maher and the rest of the anti-Trump folks said, whether those things bore out or not. Did he institute martial law? Did democracy end? Did he tank the economy? Did he put people of color in internment? Did it become astoundingly impossible to be trans in the United States? And you know, the hysteria, you know, I could list 10 hours of stuff. Just on my Facebook page, people would write, I'm a person of color. I teach at a small college in Maine. I'm afraid to drive down because Trump's gangs are going to round us up. This is a professor. This is someone that has doctor before their name. Did any of those things happen? No. Did that cause you to exhibit some sort of intellectual humility, some sort of epistemological humility, some sort of honesty to revise your opinion? No. They doubled down. How do you double down? That's where I'm going to come to homeostasis of Trump derangement syndrome. First, you say, well, I didn't say when he would become the dictator. In the first term, he was testing the systems. It's really if you give him a second term that his Hitler qualities will come to play. Just imagine the level of depraved dishonesty for a person who should have the responsibility of at least navigating through the world with honesty. Again, I hate to keep repeating this. I am Canadian. Right now, even though I right now I have a visiting professorship and global ambassadorship at Northwood University. Thank God for that. Thank God that Northwood came and freed me from my home university, because you should see what is going on at my home university. But in any case, I am right now physically in Montreal, Canada. I am Canadian. I'm a Canadian resident and a Canadian citizen. I'm not going to get to vote in the election, despite the fact that I'm sure many people will vote illegally on Tuesday. So if I care about this issue, is because I am a public commentator, right? I am someone who cares about truth, who cares about decency. And so therefore I comment about things, not because I'm hoping to get a cabinet position in Trump's cabinet, not because I stand to benefit in any careerist way. God only knows how many costs I have had to bear because of the positions that I've taken. I've lost professorships, I've lost chaired professorships, I've lost grants because of the positions I take. There's only downside. But you know what the upside is? Is that I can sleep well at night because I know that I always follow my guiding ideals of truth and freedom. Okay? So now, if you had Trump be for president for 4 years, you may have disagreed. You know, I didn't like his fiscal policy. You know, I didn't like the fact that he was a non-interventionist when it came to foreign policy. That would be perfectly reasonable. And let's sit down and talk about it. But remember the quote I just gave you by Professor Festinger, the pioneer of cognitive dissonance. When faced with information that is unequivocal and unassailable to your beliefs, you double down. So Sam didn't have the the most basic decency as a quote intellectual to say, you know what? In retrospect, boy, did I seem bombastic and unhinged when I said all these astounding things about Trump. There are many reasons why people cannot like Trump. And I might agree with some of those. But the ones that all of the Democrats and their followers and all of my professor colleagues are saying, not one of them turned out to be true. And yet, the response is, well, yeah, no kidding. He wasn't going to become Hitler in Mandate 1. It's if you're stupid enough to give him Mandate 2 that he will show you he's Hitler. Now, what is the psychological mechanisms by which they can seek to achieve that, right? Because obviously they sound like complete dishonest assholes, but they have to find a way to create, quote, cognitive consistency within the pure shite that they are peddling. So the way that they do that, one of the ways is, now I'm going to come to the homeostasis of Trump derangement syndrome. Remember, they set the thermostat at Trump is Hitler, but now it turns out that he's really not Hitler. So how can I find ways to cook reality so that I can still demonstrate that he is Hitler? Well, both Sam Harris and Bill Maher and many others have said, well, he did attack democracy. He did act like a dictator. How? Because he never conceded in a peaceful way transfer of power. Really? He didn't leave office on January 20th, 2021? Well, no, he did. But he never used the words, I, Donald Trump, officially concede and admit that I have lost this election fairly and squarely. And by me not stating exactly the words in the sequence that Sam Harris, the Malibu meditator, who, by the way, look, he speaks with a lisp. You see that progressive lisp? When I speak with a lisp, it shows that I'm smarter than you. You see that? Do you hear my lisp? That demonstrates that in Malibu, I look down on all of you assholes, all of you garbage people. Okay? So therefore, he can walk around and say, but I was right. He still hasn't conceded. He still thinks that he's holding power, even though it might seem as though Joe Biden was in power for the past 4 years. So effectively, he did walk away peacefully from, the transfer of power, but he really didn't. And you could watch exchanges between Bill Maher and Megyn Kelly, where you can see it doesn't matter what Megyn says, and Bill Maher just repeats, he hasn't conceded, and this is a death to democracy. Okay, so there are very, very deceptive tools that people use to ensure that their world is never violated, that they're always right. That's what a malignant narcissist does, right? If I come home and I speak in a curt way to one of my Belgian shepherds, I will go back and say and hug them and say, I'm so sorry about that. Give them a big kiss on their juicy muzzle. And it doesn't diminish me to admit that I was wrong. Just a few days ago, I had a spicy exchange with a guy that I didn't know until people told me about him. His name is Destiny, apparently. He was on Tom Bilyeu, and so that a clip came up where he was saying pure nonsense. So I went after him. I had no idea who he was. He seemed a bit like a castrato. And so I went after him. And then he came back after me, which to me is basically called Tuesday morning. It's no big deal. I much more formidable people than that castrato come after me. But then someone said, oh, you should go and see his personal life, his personal story. And it turns out that he was in an open marriage. His wife was getting schlocked by other guys. He got hurt, boo-hoo-hoo. Well, if you're in an open marriage, don't start crying if your wife is getting philosophized by other men. But in any case, I made allusion to that. in one of my replies. And then for the next day, it sat very badly with me. I didn't like that. Even though everything that people told me about him was that he's a real cretin and a real creep. One of the things that, you know, I hold myself to a higher standard than some of these assholes. And so I went back and both on his thread, and then I retweeted it so that everybody would see it. I apologized to him. I said, look, I didn't like the way I said that about, you know, because listen, maybe the guy is truly hurting in terms of his personal life. And in my view, it was a shitty thing for me to say that. Now, what did that take? It took humility on my part, right? Because I could say, I will never apologize, right? But it takes humility. It's a costly signal of your honesty to be willing. I mean, I have over 1 million followers on X to say, hey, I think I didn't act well. By the way, people started getting super angry at me, a lot more angry at me that I apologized to him, because they were saying, oh, you shouldn't apologize to him. So, which basically, this is another lesson. Just do what you think is right. Don't listen to what people think you should do in terms of what is right. But why am I telling this story is because I'm demonstrating to you that I walk the walk and talk the talk. If I feel that I've done something wrong, then I will stand up and apologize for it. And by the way, sometimes if I retweet something and it turns out to be wrong, people say, well, why don't you delete it? Well, I don't delete it because I want it to be publicly available that I then corrected the record. If I delete it, it's as if it never happened. Okay, so that's the level of purity and honesty that I abide by. So Sam Harris and Bill Maher and all the rest of these guys could come out and say, you know what? There are many reasons why we may disagree with Trump. But in retrospect, yes, he's not a Hitler. He's not going to put people in front of a firing squad. He's not going to kill people. That was inappropriate for us to say. And by the way, there are real consequences to speaking like that, as per 2 assassination attempts. If you convince your huge audience that there is this guy who's running for president, who's going to eat your children, rape your women, and who's going to make Hitler look like a, you know, schoolgirl party, well, then it's incumbent on you to go out and do the right thing morally, right? So standing on top of your platform when you have a huge platform does come with responsibilities. Of course, say whatever you want. I mean, as long as you don't incite violence and so on. But in this case, one could argue indirectly, you're certainly inciting violence against Donald Trump by doubling down on the fact that he is, worse than Hitler and worse than Osama bin Laden and so on. So that's number one. To give you another example of how ugly that trait is, when Sam Harris was saying all the things that he was saying about COVID, and then every single syllable that he uttered turned out to be wrong in terms of the actual reality. He went on, if you remember, I can't remember if it was, I don't think it was on trigonometry. I think it was on some show with some other guy that I don't know who he is, where he said, I'm paraphrasing, if everything that I had assumed had happened, and if the reality had been exactly opposite to what it turned out to be, then I would have been right. And therefore, I think it was perfectly reasonable that I took the position that I did. Just go and track it down in case you're thinking I'm being hyperbolic. He didn't say, in retrospect, every single one of my bullshit predictions turned out to be wrong and my logic was faulty. I mean, literally every single syllable that came out of his mouth, I'm going to be nice, turned out to be incorrect. But hey, had it turned out the way that I had said it, then I would have been right. So in my progressive lisp way in Malibu, I was right, to which I put out a Saad Truth clip, and I called it, if my grandmother had balls, we would have called her my grandfather. Or let me say it to you, for those of you who like to hear it in Arabic, إذا ستي كان عندها بيضات كنا سميناها جدي. Yeah, you want me to say it again for you? I know it's very sexy. إذا ستي كان عندها بيضات كنا سميناها جدي. If my grandmother had testicles, we would have called her my grandfather. What that demonstrates is if this and if that, and if it had turned out the way I thought, I would have been right. And if Trump wants to show that he's Hitler, it'll be in his second term. So I still think I'm right. That is the hallmark of a dishonest cretin. Okay? I have nothing personal against Bill Maher. If anything, I could argue that I'm shooting myself in the foot here because, hey, it'll be good to get on Bill Maher. I could sell more books. But it never is right to put your careerist interests in front of the truth. Bill Maher is acting like a jackass. Why? Because he's not willing. I mean, he is right on a lot of things. And there are many, many things that he said. By the way, so was Sam Harris, right? I'd like to think that Sam Harris and I mean, we weren't, the best of friends, but we had met socially. We had spoken, I went on a show. I don't hold any personal animus. I don't wish them ill will. But you have huge platforms. Be dignified. Be honest. Admit when you're wrong. Now, why does that matter? Because there's a million people. What million? There's hundreds of millions of people who are voting in the election. And many of them say, hey, I trust my Democratic politician. I trust Sam Harris. I trust Bill Maher. I trust J-Lo. Oh, by the way, J-Lo came out a few days ago, crying and, emoting that, you have to vote for Kamala Harris. And of course, Professor Dr. J-Lo is the right person to offer such advice because she's a great judge of character as per, her connection, her choosing Diddy as her soulmate once upon a time, where she went apparently to those parties. So don't listen to guys like, Elon Musk and Bill Ackman and David Sachs, and if I may put myself in this category, who say Trump is a much better. We're all idiots. Instead, listen to Rob Reiner, listen to Stephen King, listen to Barbara Streisand, listen to Scarlett Johansson, listen to J-Lo, listen to Bryan Cranston. They are the ones who really have done the heavy lifting when it comes to who is best for the United States as U.S. president. Okay, so that's another one. I'm going to go back to a topic that I discussed many times. Some of you may have heard me mention this. It's getting drunk by smelling the cork of the wine bottle. Now, some of you have heard it. It's still worth rehearing. Some of you have never heard it. So let me explain what that saying means. It's an Arabic saying which I'm translating. When you say you get drunk by simply smelling the cork, by smelling the cork of the wine bottle, it means that you are of weak constituency. That means you don't have to actually, drink the bottle before you get drunk. You simply take a whiff and you're already drunk. Now, of course, you apply that to your ability to think, right? So this is how I apply it, right? So if you ask someone, why are you voting for Kamala? Well, it's time. She's a woman. It's time. She smiles. She's happy. Trump is grotesque. Trump is mean. He's vain, right? So what you're doing is you're smelling the cork of the wine bottle, and that you're using peripheral cosmetic cues to arrive at a judgment. You hate Trump because he's an aesthetic injury to you. You love Obama because he has a mellifluous voice and a radiant smile. Every single syllable that he's ever uttered or thought is pure absolute bullshit. There is not a single semantic content in any verbal utterance that he's ever said. But my God, he says it with such beautiful cadence of a Southern Baptist minister. Look, I'm getting drunk. You see, I'm getting drunk. I'm getting woozy. I'm going to get a DUI simply because I listened to his beautiful mellifluous voice, right? That's what politicians do, right? Now, if you're smart, you're able to break through that distortion. You're able to say, well, but what are my 5 most important issues? And which candidate better describes them? By the way, all of my colleagues who are professors, who are supposed to be super smart people, many of whom are literally in my areas of psychology of decision making, behavioral scientists, consumer psychologists, evolutionary psychologists, social psychologists, business school professors that are business psychologists, they all succumb to this bullshit. So they go to class on Monday to teach us about psychology of advertising, but then they succumb to every single one of the parasitic ideas and suicidal empathy parasites that I've been warning against for decades, resulting in the parasitic mind. And now, as some of you know, I'm working on my next book, Suicidal Empathy. Okay? Now, a few days ago, I put up a thing. I saw that Arnold Schwarzenegger, Republican governor, right? Republican governor. Imagine in California, until very recently, within all of our lifespans, there was a Republican governor. Of course, Reagan too was Republican. He was from California, but that may seem like a long time ago when I was in high school. But Schwarzenegger is much closer. Now, he came out in support of Kamala Harris. So I put out a tweet, which I'm going to read for you now. It received tons of views. Sorry, I still use the term tweet. Maybe I should say post or whatever. So I put out the following, and these were just off the top of my head. It took me 5 minutes to write this post. I could have spent a lot more time and generated many other reasons why someone might vote for one party or the other. But let me read them for you in case you're one of the independent, undecided voters yet. Okay, here we go. So let me ask, this is me, I'm reading now the post that I sent to Schwarzenegger, which regrettably he hasn't responded to. Let me ask you a few questions and perhaps you'd be kind enough to reflect on these and respond. Number one, there are 13 of this, so bear with me. Which party has trampled more on freedom of speech over the past 10 years? Now here I'm going to editorialize, I'm going to add some content. Do you remember when, before Elon Musk took over X, how everybody was censored? Physicians and epidemiologists could not take a position that was contrary to the accepted, settled science position. Which party was the one that was doing that? Which party was celebrating that Donald Trump, the sitting president, was kicked off the platform at the time called Twitter? Okay? So when it comes to the First Amendment, it is unquestionable, it's unassailable which party is less for First Amendment. But let me go on. This will come up again. So, which party has trampled more on freedom of speech over the past 10 years? I mean, it is literally the case, people, that if you were a single issue voter where First Amendment and freedom of speech is your most important issue, that would be already sufficient rational reason for you to vote for Donald Trump, notwithstanding any other thing you might not like about him. So I'm not questioning that he can be bombastic and so on, and vain, right? But if you are, now if I'm going to use the fancy term from my psychology of decision-making training, if you want to use the lexicographic rule simply means I will choose the alternative that scores best on my most important attribute. So if my most important attribute is First Amendment, then I will choose Trump. If my most important attribute is immigration, then I will choose Trump. As I explained to Sam Harris in 2016, and I warned him that it was wrong for him and all of his progressive friends to be saying that, only degenerates and deplorables and garbage people and idiots and low content information voters. What kind of elitist is it to treat millions and millions of people as though they are degenerate idiots? But that's what it is when you are part of the anointed ones, to use the term of Thomas Sowell. Okay, so number one, which party has trampled more on freedom of speech over the past 10 years? 2, which party has been more lax in terms of the open borders? Which party is literally trying to import millions of illegal immigrants who then the reciprocal agreement is that you will forevermore be indebted to us and vote for us so that we can create a supermajority one-party system in the United States? Which party is doing that? What are the stats on how many illegal immigrants have come into the country when all of the different presidents were on? How does Kamala Harris and Joe Biden fare on that metric? Let's go on. Number 3. Which party promotes collectivism as per diversity, inclusion, and equity over individual dignity and meritocracy? The Democrats, right? So the first question, not that I need to answer, which party is more against the First Amendment? The Democrats. Which party is more lax about open border policies? The Democrats. Which party is more for identity politics, collectivism, tribalism, diversity, inclusion, equity over individual dignity and meritocracy? The Democrats. If I didn't utter a single word, those three reasons are 100% justifications, while you should never vote for Democrats, at least not the current version of Democrats. See, I didn't have to say Trump. I didn't have to say Kamala Harris. Vote on policies, on issues, on the ethos that is exemplified by both candidates. Let's go on. Number 4. Which party is more likely to state that the science is settled, when to do so is the most anti-scientific position that one can take? Right? Who told us repeatedly, climate science, it's settled. Transgender, women can have 9-inch penises, that's settled. Men can bear children, that's settled. Men can menstruate, that's settled. There is no biological difference that a man has over a woman in athletic sports, that's settled. Those things are settled. We will not tolerate you saying anything again. By the way, I gave a plenary address at USC on a one-day conference on the Enlightenment. For fuck's sakes, the Enlightenment values. And it was a very professorial lecture on deontological versus consequentialist ethics. During the Q&A, it was the most insane Q&A you could ever imagine. So insane that they decided not to release it, despite the fact that they had told me that they would, because they knew that I would share it on my massive platform and it wouldn't look good for USC. One person said, a lot of the stuff that you've said in this talk and in this Q&A should have the government stopping you from saying. I said, oh yeah? Can you give me an example of something that I've said that was dangerous? You ready for this? The person said, this is a researcher at USC. The person said, well, when you say things like only women bear children and only women menstruate, that's dangerous talk. I said, so let me just rephrase what you just said. Me stating that only women bear children and only women menstruate puts me on the wrong side of this issue? And his answer was yes. That's what happens when your mind is parasitized. I wasn't at a crystal meth meeting. Well, I was at USC, so it's pretty much indistinguishable. Okay? That's what's happening in universities. Let's go on. Which party tramples on the rights of biological females when it comes to allowing biological males into their athletic competitions, their dressing rooms, their prisons? Who's doing that? So the Democrats are the party of women and Trump hates women? Who is letting in male prisoners to rape female prisoners? Who's letting in male swimmers in women's locker rooms so that, the female swimmers can see the female penis of the male swimmer, who's a woman because he calls himself Linda? Who's doing that? Who resulted in 900 women losing medals? Oh, come on. Professor Saad, Dr. Saad, stop exaggerating. As they told me at the Canadian Senate in 2017, when I said there will be severe consequences. Do we owe the 900 women who spent the last 15 years of their life training because now they're not on the podium? Well, no, because suicidal empathy. Because the feelings of transgender folks matter more than half of humanity called, you know what they're called? They're called women. Which party is violating that? Which party is raping the ambitions of women, if not their bodies? The Democrats or the Republicans? But abortion, Roe versus Wade. Let's go on. Which party is more likely to adopt economic policies that are in line with socialism, much more so than capitalism? Which party? Is the United States a socialist country, or is the United States a capitalist country? Do we have any data from the past 100 years as to whether maximal flourishing of individuals, if not societies, happen under a capitalistic or a socialist government? But hey, don't let evidence get in the way of your preferred ideology. It's because true socialism hasn't been tried yet. It's because true communism hasn't been tried yet. That's why Kamala Harris, a degenerate, the only person that I have ever seen in public or private life that is dumber, maybe not dumber, than Kamala Harris is Justin Trudeau. The only difference is that Kamala Harris is a lot more masculine than Justin Trudeau. Okay? It sounds like I'm trying to be funny, but they know nothing. They've read nothing. They believe in nothing. They're shells. Their craniums are filled with parasitized jello. That's who's going to lead the most important country in the world, the last bastion of freedom. A woman who learns lines that are straight out of socialism and communism. I will institute, whatever, price controls and so on. I've already done a whole clip on that. She comes from a Marxist family. It doesn't take a fancy professor to tell you that you're likely going to be influenced by the environment in which you've grown up. That's why Barack Obama is an asshole socialist, Marxist. That's why Kamala Harris is a Marxist socialist, because that's what she's been taught, right? It's not necessarily because she's innately evil, right? See, unlike all of the Democrats, I'm not purporting that Kamala Harris is dispositionally an evil person. She's astoundingly dumb, incredibly poorly read, knows nothing, can't think on her feet, can't utter a single sentence, can't have any emotional intelligence to connect with anybody, but she has some knee pad abilities. And that has allowed her to ascend the hierarchy by wink, wink, descending the hierarchy, so to speak. And that has allowed her to potentially in 3 days hold the most important position in the world. Is Trump a perfect candidate? Absolutely not. Does he exemplify American values to an astoundingly higher level than Kamala? Nothing could be clearer. Vote carefully. Now, what worries me is that all of the people that are in this X spaces are probably already Trump voters. That's why I would love to go on shows from the left, because the goal is not to try to persuade those with whom I already agree with me. It's to try to persuade those who are parasitized, who do suffer from suicidal empathy. Okay, let me go on through the list. I'm at number 7 now. Which party is more lax on criminals? Which party consistently alters the judicial system so that you are more empathetic to criminals? Which party removes the 3 strikes you're out and you're outlaw in California? Which party is against the death penalty even for guys who have killed and sodomized children with their DNA on them? Because it's not right. Which party allows incredibly lax bail procedures and parole systems? Which party is more likely to say that if a criminal is a criminal, that's because society has failed him? By the way, this is all going to be in my forthcoming book. Which party does that? So if you care about safety, if you care about closing the borders, if you care about individual dignity and individual meritocracy, is the choice not clear? Right? You could still hate Trump. And there might be very, very good personal reasons why you hate Trump. You don't like his style. You don't like the way he brags. You don't like his humor. All good stuff. But nobody's asking you to have him as your best friend or as your lover. People are asking you to make a choice that have downstreams effect on the entire world. Kamala Harris exhibit those traits? Let's go on. Which party is a greater supporter of the Second Amendment? Right? Suddenly now, the lobotomized cackler, she's a gun owner. She's John Wayne. Who's been consistently trying to infringe on the Second Amendment? Democrats or Republicans? Let's go on. Professors who belong to which party are most likely to be the originators of all of the parasitic ideas that are destroying the West? That's my 2020 book, The Parasitic Mind, right? Every single idea that is destroying the fabric of the West stems from leftist Democrat professors. Every single one. Now, it's not hard to explain why that is, because most professors are leftist Democrats. And therefore, they're going to be the ones who are spawning, promulgating all of the bullshit that comes out of the universities. But those bullshit ideas become our prime ministers and our presidents and our CEOs and our filmmakers and our songwriters and our journalists. So they chokehold all of the cultural creations, and therefore all of the members of the anointed ones who have a progressive lisp. You see, now I'm speaking with a progressive lisp because I'm smarter than all of you assholes, because you're all garbage. Okay. One of the reasons why I resonate with millions of people is because, notwithstanding the fact that I'm a professor and I've got all those fancy titles and so on, I am a man of the people, in that I don't talk down to people. As a matter of fact, as I've explained a million times, I prefer to receive a fan email from a trucker who goes from Toledo to Oregon and listens to my show and says he's found a new love for evolutionary psychology by listening on my show, than if it were a smarmy colleague of mine who said that he read my paper and loved it. Not that I don't appreciate that, of course I do. But when you resonate with the average person, then your message is appealing. Most professors can't relate to the people down there. They can't relate to the farmers, to the welders, to the electricians, to the corrections officers, to the police officers. They're asshole, lowly people to the Democrats, right? No. They're the ones who do the heavy lifting in society so that people like me can have the opportunity to sit in the ivory tower and think and hopefully come up with good ideas. That's not what my colleagues think. They think you're all assholes. They think that if you vote for someone that is different from them, it's because you are immoral. You're a degenerate. They say it to me. They've said it to me. That's what we talk about in faculty clubs. And of course, since I'm a very outspoken professor that doesn't support their ideas, I no longer get invited to the faculty parties. All right, let's go on. Number 10. This is, remember, I'm talking to Arnold Schwarzenegger. You were in a film where you had gotten pregnant. I don't remember the name of the movie. It's with Danny DeVito. Which party is more likely to espouse the position that men too can get pregnant and have menstrual cycles? Number 11. Which party is more likely to grant massive amounts of taxpayer money to illegal immigrants over American vets? So an American vet says, hey, choose me. I'll go and fight your war in Iraq. I'll go and fight your war in Afghanistan. I will come back with permanent psychological damage. I will come back with limbs blown off. I will come back damaged physically, spiritually, emotionally. But hey, when I come back, will you take care of me? Which party is more likely to say, shut up, American vet. I got to give that money to the MS-13 gang members and the Venezuelan gang members upon coming into the United States? Which party is more likely to do that? Let's go on. Number 12. Which party is more in line with the I have a dream message from Martin Luther King? What is the message of Martin Luther King? Remember the old thing? I dream that one day my daughter can live in a world where she's judged based on the content of her character and not the color of her skin. Remember that little speech? Yeah? Does Kamala Harris abide by that? So let's suppose you're someone who is a fan of the ideals of Martin Luther King. The United States has a day that is reserved as a federal holiday for Martin Luther King because he exemplifies the best the aspiration of what the American ethos should be. Yes? That's why we have him in the history books. Does Kamala Harris adhere to that principle, or does she violate it? Use simple words so I can follow. It's fucking unbelievable, the level of degeneracy that I see in the United States. I say the United States, it's everywhere. Where there are people, there is stupidity. That's why the quote attributed to Einstein, which I'm sure I will botch, there are only two things that I am assured of. The infinite stupidity of the universe and the infinite stupidity of people, and I'm not so sure about the universe, or something to that effect. Meaning that many, many brilliant people have remarked in various ways, sometimes humorous, sometimes serious, at how bafflingly stupid most people are. And that, I don't mean that as an elitist thing. I say that with great regret. Because it doesn't matter if you're stupid in the conduct of your, myopic personal life. But it does matter when you might be putting in the White House a complete shell of a human being who knows nothing. By the way, Kamala Harris is exactly my age. Kamala Harris went to high school very close to where I went to high school. I played soccer against Kamala Harris high school when Kamala Harris was at that high school. Okay? The high school that she went to is the worst. I mean, it's not a very prestigious high school. And even back then, even more so today. She sucked. She did very poorly. She failed. She didn't get into her law school until she, got through some scam. She failed her bar exam. She's a moron. I know cucumbers that graduated from law school. You just have to have a pulse to graduate from law school. She didn't graduate out of Yale and clerked for a Supreme Court justice. She graduated from some shitty college. Okay, fine, Howard, the black Harvard. By the way, I interviewed at Howard for my first professorship. In any case, let's go on. Number 13, last point. Which party is more desirous of setting up a misinformation and disinformation board, an idea that is antithetical to the most basic tenets of the First Amendment? Right? Do you remember when the Biden administration brought this woman to be the first czar of disinformation and misinformation? I mean, literally, the second that every American hears that the sitting administration is setting up a disinformation and misinformation board, that should be disqualifying to ever hold power again. It is contrary to the most fundamental principle of a free society. Who gets to choose what is misinformation and disinformation? Does stating that the lab came from China, is that now misinformation, disinformation, or is it true? That the COVID vaccine protects you and you cannot spread it after you have, is that true or is that misinformation? That women can have 9-inch penises, is that true or is that misinformation? That women can bear children, is that misinformation or disinformation, or is it veridical? Okay. So once you say that we need to set up a system to protect you, because otherwise you idiotic plebs would not be able to handle information, then you've fallen into the worst instance of Kafkaesque and Orwellian nightmares. Which party has been calling for those kinds of misinformation and disinformation boards? I mean, literally, I've given you 13 reasons that should any 3 of those 13 should make it clear who you should vote for. And yet, Sam Harris will say, yeah, sure, Gad. Sure, Professor Dr. Saad, with all your fancy thinking. But Trump is an existential threat. Why, Sammy? Why, Sammy boy? Well, because he's never conceded defeat. How so, Sammy? How so, degenerate Sammy? Has he been in power? Did he relate? Well, he created January 6th, where there was a massive military coup. It was a military coup. It was an insurrection. Who died? Hundreds of policemen died. Well, not really. Only one died from a stroke. The actual person who actually died was shot by Capitol Police. So you see, The veracity of information doesn't matter when people want to protect their ideologies. Now, I expect that from the common person. I don't mean that in an elitist way. But if you stand with your progressive lisp, if you've written a book called Lying, where, this is Sam Harris, where he is rejecting living a life of lies, how could you sleep at night promulgating such lies? What kind of human being are you? All right, I'm almost done. I wanted to read to you something that happened to my daughter a couple of days ago. I'm going to read to you the post verbatim. This is from October 31st. It's gotten almost 2 million views. My daughter called me earlier this afternoon to tell me that she wanted to hold a debate about Trump versus Harris in her class. The teacher told her something to the effect, quote, "I suppose that you are for Trump," close quote. By the way, I wonder how he would know that, because it's not as though my daughter is walking around with a MAGA hat, probably because he knows that she's my daughter. My daughter replied, "Yes, of course." He retorted that his child is queer and would not be allowed in the US under Donald Trump, an astounding falsehood that is unbefitting of a teacher. Did you hear what I just said? If Trump wins, trans people would not be allowed in the United States. So this teacher's kid would never be allowed into the United States. Because right now, we don't have any proof that there are trans people who live in the United States and that lived so under Trump. Like, there would be no way for us to falsify the veracity of that information. This is a teacher speaking. Let's go on. My daughter replies, quote, "Yeah, well, Kamala Harris would allow men to be in the bathroom shower with me," in reference to so-called trans women, close quote. The teacher responds, quote, "Sit down now, you ready? So what's the big deal? Not all of them are going to be sexually assault you," close quote. And then I conclude my post. "You see, his queer child's feelings are more important than the rights of my teenage daughter to not have men in the locker room with her. Vote carefully on November 5th, 2024. It is breathtaking. I think that another fatherly intervention is forthcoming." Okay. Now, this is a Canadian teacher at a Montreal high school. Why is he so hateful of Trump? Because he's a teacher. Because all teachers, all social workers, all clinical psychologists, all therapists, all journalists, all movie producers, all actors, all professors know the reality. Democrats good, Republicans no. If I sit down with them and I start applying my GAD approach to test them, they wilt like little castrated invertebrates, because all they know is Democrats. See, Democrats, and the word is in that word is contained the concept of democrat, democracy. Therefore, the Democrats are good. Republicans are bad. Republicans are Hicks. Republicans are against evolution. Republicans are more religious. I'm a good person. I'm a liberal person. Therefore, I vote for the Liberal Party in Canada. Even though every single position that the Liberal Party in Canada is the definition of illiberal policies, that's too much for me to think. I just prefer to say liberals good, conservatives bad. So let me now conclude everything. Most people have the cognitive ability to think through things that is equivalent to that of a squirrel. By the way, my condolences to Peanut, who was whisked away with the raccoon and killed by the overreach of government. So most people prefer to use simplifying heuristics in making decisions, one of which is to let your emotional system guide your decisions. Why? Because your emotions are autonomic. Kamala smiles. Kamala has lady parts of color. Good enough for me. I'm a good person. It's time for a change. Why? Because the first 46 presidents had testicles and they had a penis. We need something that has different genitalia. Therefore, I'm a good person. That's why I'm voting for her. It doesn't matter that everything that she stands for might be against every single thing that I understand the United States to be, but I'm a good person. That's why my next book, Suicidal Empathy, is coming out. Because while the parasitic mind deals with what happens to people when their cognitive systems are parasitized, suicidal empathy will complete the story by showing you what happens when your emotional system is parasitized. Oh boy, that was 1 hour. I only wish that you can please, please, I beg you, send this to everyone you know. Don't forget that this now is recorded on X. Send it to people and say, hey, Professor Saad has just broken down some of the reasons. You may like it, you may not like it, but at least have the decency to think before you make a decision. By the way, you don't know how many people have written to me in Canada and have told me, I feel so ashamed. I wish that I would have listened to you when you were warning us about Justin Trudeau. And it's not because I am an oracle, and it's not because I have a prophetic crystal ball. It's because I am pathological in my commitment to truth. I'm not in any way tribal. There's a set of beliefs that I believe in, and then whomever exemplifies those beliefs more is the one that I'm going to support. So I don't care about what you label a party, right? There are some issues that I'm incredibly socially liberal on. I don't give a shit who you sleep with at night. I don't give a shit about your trans stuff. Live and let live. But when it comes to economic policies, yes, capitalism is superior to socialism. When it comes to the penal system, yes, there should be consequences if you do bad things. It's very severe consequences. You don't put on an empathy hat when dealing with someone who has raped children, with someone who has raped women, with someone who has killed people. No, you don't get to be a felon with 67 prior convictions and you're still walking on the street. No, we throw away the fucking key. Because Newton explained to us, for every action, there's a reaction. In life, there's a thing called cause and effect. For every cause, there's an effect. There is a repercussion. If you tell people that there are no consequences for them stealing, raping, killing, looting, then people will do it. It doesn't take a fancy psychologist to explain this to you. Vote carefully on Tuesday. God bless the United States. Good luck. Take care, everybody. Cheers.